Welcome to the Overhead Industrial Cranes Safety Training Module. This module will cover the following topics: what overhead cranes are, how they work, how to perform safety inspections on overhead cranes, and safe procedures for working with an overhead crane. Cranes are machines used to lift and move heavy loads. Because of their great power, cranes can be the most dangerous piece of equipment at a work site. Every year in the United States, crane-related accidents lead to hundreds of injuries, several dozen deaths, and millions of dollars in property damage. Because of the potential for accidents, operating a crane requires great responsibility. Cranes are used in factories, warehouses, and shipyards to provide lifting and movement of heavy objects within the area covered by the crane's area of operation. Three primary types of cranes are used in industrial settings: bridge cranes, gantry cranes, and jib cranes. Bridge cranes are mounted on parallel rails attached to elevated wall structures. The bridge is a beam that runs between the two rails. A trolley with a hoist mechanism travels back and forth on the bridge. Gantry cranes have a bridge supported by two legs that move along floor-mounted rails or on wheels. As with the bridge crane, a trolley runs back and forth on the bridge. Jib cranes have a jib or a boom that is mounted to a wall or a mast. The jib crane swings in an arc around its pivot, and the trolley runs from end to end on the jib. The term rigging refers to any equipment used to attach a load to the crane's hook. Slings are the most common type of rigging. They support a load by wrapping around it or by connecting to it. Other examples of below-the-hook rigging devices are clamps, magnets, vacuum lifters, C-hooks, and spreader beams. Knowing safe rigging practices can be just as important as knowing how to operate a crane. For more details on rigging practices, check out our Crane Rigging Safety module. Industrial overhead cranes have controllers that give the operator control of all of the crane movements: bridge travel, trolley travel, and hoist raise and lower. The controller will either be a pendant control, meaning it's hardwired to the crane structure, or a wireless radio control. Some cranes will have both, with the pendant control acting as backup to the radio control. A pendant control requires the operator to walk with the load as it travels along the bridge. There are three things that must be verified before a lift is attempted. The crane and rigging must have been inspected. The crane and rigging must have enough capacity to lift the load, and the load and rigging must be stable. The following section will show you how these concerns are addressed. The first thing to inspect before using a crane is the area where the crane will operate. The area should be clear of obstacles that would prevent the safe movement of the crane and the load. Remove any obstacles that someone might trip on. Clean up any liquids on the floor that might be a slipping hazard. If there is liquid on the floor, ensure that it didn't leak from a crane component. Check out the intended path of the load. Make sure it is clear of personnel and any obstacles such as debris, vehicles, or other equipment that might block the load's movement. Don't just look on the floor. Look up, too. There may be obstacles blocking the movement of the crane bridge that might not be obvious. A visual inspection of the crane components must be completed by the operator before the crane is turned on. The operator should look for any problems with the main crane mechanisms that would interfere with proper operation. This includes problems with the bridge or trolley. The operator should look for any deterioration or leakage in any pneumatic or hydraulic lines or components. Your workplace will have its own checklist of specific inspections that must be done before crane operation. The hoists on different cranes use different hoisting lines. Wire rope is used on larger cranes. Smaller cranes can use link chain, leaf chain, or roller chain. Operators must perform a simple visual inspection of all hoist lines and main rigging lines before operating the crane. For wire ropes, look for problems such as broken strands, kinking, bird caging, and knots. For chain links, look for distorted links or cracked links. If there is any problem with a rope or chain, it should be rejected. When in doubt about whether a rope or chain is safe, talk to a supervisor before lifting. Hooks can be damaged from normal wear and tear or from lifting heavy loads. Reject hooks with either of the following problems: stretched more than 5% in excess of the normal throat opening, or twisted more than 10 degrees from the plane of the unbent hook. After visually inspecting the work area and the crane, a test of the crane's movements must be performed. The primary movements for most cranes are bridge movement in both directions, trolley movement in both directions, and hoist movement, raise and lower. Verify that the crane operates correctly with no problems. When running the crane, look for unusual movement and listen for unusual noise that could indicate a problem. Also, test the brakes and the emergency stop brake to make sure the brake is working for all three types of crane movement. Some cranes have status lights that tell whether the crane is currently powered or unpowered. If your crane has these lights, check to make sure they are working correctly. Cranes must have an audible alarm that sounds when the crane is moving, unless the crane operator can clearly see the entire path of travel. Test all warning bells or alarms on the crane. Alarms should be loud enough to be heard over the site's ambient noise. Along with the trolley and bridge movement inspection, it's very important to check the limit switches. The upper limit switch is a safety device that prevents the load block from contacting the hoist assembly. If the block rises too high and trips the upper limit switch, the switch is designed to shut the crane off. Some cranes have a lower limit switch that provides the same protection when a hoist is extended all the way down. Limit switches are only an emergency device. Never use a limit switch as a way to raise a load all the way up or lower it all the way down. To test the limit switch, start with the load block a couple feet from the limit switch. Slowly inch the hoist upward by going quickly back and forth between the raise control and neutral. If the limit switch works and stops the load block, lower the block a few feet and raise it again at full speed. If the limit switch doesn't work at any point in the testing process, stop using the crane immediately, put out a warning tag, and notify your supervisor. Safety inspections are very important. Always perform all inspections required by your workplace before use. If you find equipment that is not safe to use, it is your duty to report the problem so that it can be repaired. If the crane or the rigging has problems and must be left unattended, place warning tags in a visible location so everyone will know to not operate the crane. More extensive inspections of cranes and crane components are required at longer intervals. These extensive inspections are done by qualified personnel, not by the crane operator. The most important factor when lifting is to make sure you don't lift more than the crane or the rigging can handle. Before lifting any load, you should know: the load capacity of the crane, the load capacity of the rigging, and the weight of the load. When in doubt about whether a crane or rigging equipment is rated to lift a load, talk to your supervisor. The most important factor when using a sling is the sling angle. A sling can lift the most when the sling legs are closest to vertical and the sling angle is near 90 degrees. The smaller the sling angle gets, the smaller the sling's load capacity gets. The closer to horizontal the sling legs get, the more stress is put on the sling. This is easy to see with a real-world example. Which of the following two tasks would be easier? Holding two buckets with your arms down at your side, or holding the buckets with your arms straight out? It's easier when your arms are straight down because your arms have a greater lifting capacity when the load's center of gravity is beneath the lifting force. It is the same with the sling. A 1-ton load can produce several tons of stress on each sling arm at a low sling angle. This is why spreader and lifting beams are used for longer loads. They make the sling legs more vertical. Manufacturer-supplied load charts give the capacity of slings at different angles. If there is a doubt about the safety of a rigging job, let your supervisor know. When working near or with people, a crane operator must be extra cautious. A good crane operator always errs on the side of caution and never puts anyone in harm's way. Always be aware of your area of operation before you start a lift. Be aware of nearby people and be sure that they are not too close to the crane. When working near people, remember these additional warnings. Never move a load over a person. Never allow anyone to ride on a load. And never let people get in pinch points between the load and other obstacles, such as walls or products. Before lifting, be sure to position the hoist directly above the load. Cranes are only designed to lift straight up, not from the side. Lifting a load from the side is called side loading. This can increase the stress on the crane, cause crane damage, and cause the load to swing. Be sure the load is stable in its rigging. If the load has an abnormal center of gravity, take this into account when arranging the rigging. When using hooks, make sure the attachments are centered in the hook bowl and that safety latches are closed. Never use the tips of a hook to lift a load. This is a very dangerous mistake. An experienced operator moves a load smoothly. Keeping the load stable and under control is the top priority. Always take your time and move the crane with slow, smooth movements. Sudden movements of the crane, either up and down or side to side, can cause what is known as shock loading. Always avoid shock loading because it greatly increases stress on the crane and the rigging. Travel with the load as low to the floor as possible, but make sure you can still clear any obstacles. Be sure that the slings or hoist lines don't become tangled or twisted while moving the load. When walking with the load, walk beside the load so that it can be easily seen. Do not walk ahead of the load. Tag lines are lines attached to the load. They may be used to better control the load while it's in motion. For long moves, stop periodically to make sure the load is stable and that the path is clear. When arriving at the load's destination, come to a stop slowly. Try to minimize any swinging of the load. When the load is above its destination, make sure it is stable and barely swinging. Lower the load slowly and smoothly. Keep an eye on the load the whole time it is landing to make sure it is stable and landing correctly. Always land the load fully. Never leave a load suspended for long periods of time. And don't leave the crane unattended if it's carrying a load. If you think a crane or a sling might have been overloaded, even briefly, notify a supervisor. An overloaded crane and the rigging can be weakened without showing damage. Never assume that because everything looks okay, that the equipment isn't damaged. The crane must be inspected and tested by a qualified person before it will be ready to be used again. Usually there is just one operator who performs the lift himself. On some crane jobs, though, there might be dedicated workers assigned to one or more of the following positions: tagline holder, signal person, and rigger. The operator will usually be the one in charge of a lift. Everyone on a group lift should have a clear understanding of their duties. Everyone should also understand the meaning of the crane hand signals being used. When working around industrial cranes, follow the following rules about personal protective equipment. Wear gloves to protect your hands from bruises, cuts, and rope burn. Wear steel-toed shoes to protect your feet from dropped loads or equipment. Avoid loose clothing and jewelry that may cause snags. Tuck in your shirt so the loose ends do not cause a snag. And, finally, wear a hard hat to protect against head injuries. Your workplace might have other rules about required protective equipment, such as eye protection or hearing protection. This course has shown you how overhead cranes work and the most basic safety concerns when using them. When operating an overhead industrial crane, remember these key points. Understand the type of crane, rigging, and controls of the crane you are using. Always perform inspections of the crane, the rigging, and the work area. Know the load capacity of the crane and its rigging, and do not overload this equipment. Use safe procedures when lifting, moving, and setting down loads. And always adhere to the required dress code. Crane operators should always get the appropriate training for the specific equipment they will be using on the job. With proper training and constant attention to safe operating procedures, crane operators will avoid injuries, fatalities, and property damage.